From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports news and topics of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't yet, go leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast. It helps others to discover the show. I promise I read them all. I'm humbled by all of them. I'm thankful that you guys leave such lovely comments on the show. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
Doing great, Paul. Happy podcast day, everybody. Paul, I want to hear from you. You have had such a busy week, such a busy day. Do you want to share with the listeners what you've been doing this week?
Yeah, if my voice sounds a bit hoarse, I am chairing the Dubai Esports Festival this week. It's basically a 2-day summit that kicks off almost 3 weeks of esports festival here in Dubai, including a very big PUBG championship, which will be part of the festival. But a 2-day like B2B kind of business summit, which I am chairing and hosting and moderating a zillion panels. So if I'm a little bit hoarse, that's why, and I apologize. But look, we had His Excellency, the Minister of AI and Digital from Dubai at the show today, which was amazing. Made an amazing speech about sort of how he saw the future of esports and gaming within Dubai. And it's just amazing to see it was like 3 times oversold. They literally sold 3 times the capacity of the room, which is fun to see this much excitement around gaming in Dubai. You know, Saudi Arabia gets a lot of the press these days because of the big numbers that they're spending, but I still think Dubai is probably the best place to be. You know, there's a culture here of hospitality and tourism that just lends itself so well to the gaming industry. So very excited to be chairing the show. Very excited to have met His Excellency Omar bin Sultan Al Alama today. But I'm dreading a little bit tomorrow because I'm worried I'm going to lose my voice completely. And no thanks to daylight savings time, by the way. We need to figure this out.
You need to get rid of daylight savings altogether. Elections was yesterday. I hope everyone voted. I didn't see that one on the ballot this year, unfortunately. but yeah, good reminder. And also another reminder to our regular listeners and to our new listeners, we do the live show every Wednesday right after this recording, which you guys usually get later in the week. Every Wednesday, 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern, and those times are totally different for you now, Paul. That's like 1 in the morning, huh?
No, it's now 11:30 p.m. Dubai time. So it's been a long day.
So if you want to contest Paul, if you want to ask the hard questions, he's going to be a little more tired than normal. Get your shots in.
Definitely now's the time to take advantage. And this is when I'm at my weakest. But no, it's been fun. And look, I highly recommend for everyone who follows us, we're going to put as many of these panels that I'm on or like these conferences that I'm speaking at, we're going to put as many of them as possible up on our podcast feed. So you'll be able to be there with us and you'll get to experience the content and the panelists and the topics. But I really highly encourage people to come out here, right? Like if you're in the industry and you want to get a sense of what's going on out here, reach out to Jimmy or to myself and, happy to plug you into the ecosystem here. I've had a few people reach out to me saying, they're going to Riyadh for this or they're going to Dubai for that. And I've been happy to plug them into the ecosystem here. So highly recommend that, experiencing it firsthand. So let's Jimmy, this is, I also want to say one last thing, and it's we have an amazing guest this week who reminded me of this. This is episode 300. It's numbered 300, which is a pretty major milestone. The only thing is it's a 300 on a technicality. I think we're at more like 370 or 380 episodes, because we at one point called them, the live streams B episodes, as opposed to numbering them on their own. But it's still cool to see 300 on the podcast feed as a numbering. So congratulations, Jimmy. You've made it now through I don't even know how many episodes you've done with me, but it's been nice getting to do these with you.
I've also been a listener since the very beginning, so it's been really cool to see the brand grow. God, way back when. So what a journey. But yeah, without further ado, Paul, I think we should start the thing.
We should start the thing. We're lucky today because, and I think our guest today is so on topic, especially with me, doing a whole bunch of stuff out in Dubai here. We have none other than Andrew Spalter, who is the founder and CEO of East Goes Global. I love the name, such a cool play on words. Andrew, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Honored to be here.
Andrew, for our audience that maybe doesn't know about you or about East Goes Global, we'd love if you gave a bit of your background, how you got into gaming, why you got into gaming at all, what East Goes Global does.
Sure.
And a little bit about the business and what you're focused on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul. I think, first thing I want to touch on is the play on words comment that you made. Thank you for seeing that. I got to be honest, not a lot of people do. And when we use the acronym of EGG and our logo are smiling eggs, it takes a lot of people or a lot of time for people to put two and two together. So they're like, eggs, why is it egg? And why are your logos eggs? And I'm like, well, East Coast Global, it's acronym for egg. And anyways, so on and so forth. You would be surprised. It takes quite a few minutes for people to understand that. But yeah, I mean, the short of it is, or at least I'll try to make this as short as possible. I was in music management. I was working with Joel and Benji Madden of Good Charlotte when they had launched their management firm called MDDN. It's for artists by artists. They're some of the first guys to do that concept really, really, really well. And really took what they learned as, these worldwide celebrities, pop punkers, punk rockers, pop stars, and turned it into a business that was really for artists in terms of management. So when I was over there, this was 2015 through late 2015 through I think 2018, right around middle 2018. They had launched a management firm, and I was working with an artist named Jessie J. She was randomly a once in a lifetime type of opportunity on this TV show in China called Singer, which a lot of people compare it to The Voice here in the Western side of the world. But the difference is that the judges are the audience. So you have that American Idol audience factor. But the competitors, unlike The Voice and unlike American Idol, were the top artists. And it's a competition show, the top artists throughout Asia, and particularly China.
Wow.
She was the first ever Western artist on the program. And this was 2017, 2018. I had never been to China. I didn't really have anything in the books. There was no real impetus for me to get out there other than as a tourist. And I get off the plane, and this is me being as naive and as green as possible and never being out there and landing and going, is anyone getting emails? And can you get on TikTok or not TikTok? Then it wasn't around, but can you get on Instagram? And I tried to watch Netflix in bed last night. That wasn't working. And very quickly learning about the Great Firewall and how a lot of platforms and verticals just weren't accessible from the market over in China. And while we were there, I would be asking the producers of the program, how do we promote the show? How do we promote that we're on it? And that's when I very quickly learned about platforms like Weibo and WeChat and Xiaohongshu and Bilibili and all these verticals that now just about all of our clients are across and working. But then it was like such a foreign concept to me, and I could never really find a right team to help us manage that presence and market. Which in turn, the light bulb moment. And that's when, after we got back from the States, I launched East Goes Global, what was then, glorified Chinese social media management firm. And now we're spread into a few different verticals that I'm sure we'll get to on the program today.
Andrew, what's usually the impetus for a talent or an esports team or like an influencer or like whatever the customer may be? What is usually the impetus for them to come to you? Like what is that moment where they're like, hey, we need this, or we need to be thinking about this, or we need to be doing this?
That is a really great question. And I should really take the time going into the end of the year to write down on Post-it notes what those things are. Because if we could identify the 5 or 6 of them, then I think we'd be in a really great place to go after new clients. But nowadays our business is a lot of inbound, and which we're very fortunate to have. And time again, the common denominator is a combination of a few things. Number one, they're starting to see revenue and they've never had revenue, or there's brands reaching out to them, or things that they're like, how is this happening? Like, what did we do? Where is this Because you go into TikTok and you can't find China within TikTok because TikTok's not available in China, even though it's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese owned and operated entity. Rather, they have a sister platform in China called Douyin. And YouTube is not available on all these platforms. So they reach out to us to do some sort of audit to really understand what's going on for them in market. They start to see a lot of comments on their Western socials saying, hey, you're really big in China. You should really open up a presence here and a channel on this platform. And I think the third biggest is when we get a kind of global presence, global superstar type of person who's like, their head of digital goes, we've known about these platforms, but we never met someone that could really help us. And so that's when we come in as this Western-based headquartered team in the States that goes, we're transparent, we're on your time zone, we could have calls all hours of the day, we have a team and boots on the ground in China, and really helping, not just going, hey, we'll make you a ton of money out there, but really like lift the veil over the markets that what's going on, and you could speak to it and you could capitalize on it.
Is it a bit of a black box though in your mind? Like, meaning in the Western world, are we just not aware necessarily of what's going on there? And because you mentioned something here where,
right.
They see in their comments that they're really big in China. I mean, it seems weird, right? Like I start thinking about, is the Prophet like really big in China and I just don't know about it, right? Like someone's rebroadcasting our content somewhere in China and,
Absolutely. I think you've brought up a lot of great points that are all really eye-opening to, depending on who's listening and what type of vertical you're in and working. I mean, transparently, you go onto Bilibili, which is the, quote unquote, the YouTube of China, and it has 200 million plus users the last I checked. It could be 250, 300, I don't know today. Primarily, that started out as a esports hyper-focused platform where gamers would jump on and post highlight clips or reels or whatever it was and live on these channels. And no one from the West was working it. And now it's a platform that has 200 plus million users. So you can imagine the type of content that's living on these channels. We worked with Gary Vee to Will Smith to Ninja to, all these different people. And part of our proposal to them is taking screenshots of this platform and going, look at what fans are already saying and doing with you and your brand and market. This is unbelievable. And the fact of the matter is just like getting started anywhere else in the world. You need a TikTok and a Twitch and a this and a that, and to lay the foundation to get your brand exposure. In China, you're starting from nothing. Even someone as well known as Mr. Beast has never had channels in market that are operating, at full capacity. And so when we see that, we're like, look, there's a lot of opportunity, but you are starting from the ground, from ground zero here. And we need to lay that foundation to get you to the next level.
How much value do your clients find, specifically with their sponsors and their other partners, in attracting this new demographic and this new audience? I mean, is it part of it just getting their brand up on those platforms, or can you talk more also about then how you're monetizing in a different way? Because again, maybe someone like a Coca-Cola USA doesn't want to sponsor content that's being distributed in Asia. So I'd love to see the next iteration, I suppose, of expanding someone's brand presence to that part of the world, and then obviously driving meaningful revenue and partnerships from it.
You guys are asking the best questions that I've ever answered on a podcast, because this is all stuff that we as a team have been talking about as we get towards the end of the year. It's like, where is the value that we're bringing our clients? And some clients, and Jimmy, to answer your question, some clients, we just want channels opened, operated, managed, whether it's passively and you're taking everything from our US channels over there to the full other end of the spectrum where they're like, we need the presence, we want the marketing support, but that's not what we care about. Of course, we want the followers, but we want to see return on our investment. We want the value add. We want to bring in sponsorship and opportunities. And you know, it's a really interesting selling point for us that we always pitch to these people that already have these global types of deals is, I'm sure you guys see it and hear about it all the time. This person just partnered with this company, or this brand just did this, and vice versa. I can almost 100% confidently say that 9 times out of 10, those deals that these people are doing are global deals. I can also confidently say that 9 times out of 10, that global deal it's global, it's inclusive of China, but that person that they're doing a deal with has no channels set up in market. So they're missing a fifth of the world's population, right? Billions of people across these platforms, where if they had accounts and had 100,000 followers, 250,000 followers, 10,000 followers, 1 million followers, that they could leverage and use in this deal and cross promote across the board. And I think a lot of people are not realizing that, yeah, just because Coca-Cola is a globally recognized brand, if you're doing a global deal with them, but it's with their US entity, no one's asking what's happening with this in Europe if we're doing a global deal, and what's happening in China, and what's happening in Japan and Southeast Asia. And I would hope that, you know, when people hear this and they're part of that repertoire of doing these globally focused deals, that they take a step back and they're like, wait a minute, like, we just did a global deal. I've heard nothing about a fifth of the world's population. I've heard nothing about India. I've heard nothing about China. I've heard nothing about these places that make up a majority of the world.
Andrew, is there a size at which your services, for example, become most relevant to an influencer, or like in our case, we're talking about gaming, right? So like an esports team, or a, you know, gamer, streamer, etc. Like, is there a size at which it doesn't make sense to be going to China or be thinking about that, but at a certain point it does? And where is that point if it exists? Like
that another really wonderful question, and something we've been in business now 5, almost 6 years. And every year we come to this kind of fork in the road where it's like, who is the perfect client, right? And I think it's a lot easier said than done in trying to figure that out. But what we've learned is that there's not a one size fits all strategy. So what we've done, and this is fairly recently, I mean, only 2 months ago, we've opened up a vertical of business called Plug and Play, where let's say that, guys, you had a social presence and you wanted to push it globally, but you don't really want to invest the time, money, resources. You just want the foundation. You want the I guess the concrete laid down, you know, and it's just settling down. You're just mixing the concrete and cement, and you come to us and you go, look, I don't have that much money to spend. I don't really want to. We have a plug and play solution. It's $500 a month, where we verify the 3 main verticals in China that you should be: Weibo, Douyin, and Shouhangshu Red, which is an Instagram-like platform in China. Douyin is the TikTok of China, and Weibo is like the Facebook, Twitter of China. And we launch those platforms to take everything that you're doing on Western platforms and mirror it over into China. So you have an existing presence with not spending an arm and a leg for a service, right? So we actually recommend early on that people should jump in and go, I need to lay the foundation, because the second you get a global deal or a brand deal or anything like that, you could then double down and go, look, I have these platforms too. Are these included in it? You have a global brand. We should include this. And I think, you know, but then again, on the other end of the spectrum, you could have a team, a globally ranked, very well-known esports organization. And what Jimmy and I were talking about before this call a little bit is speaking to these teams that are going, we don't want the foundation. We want this to be a multi-million-dollar business in the next 3 to 5 years. How do we get there? And that, of course, is a different threshold of entry, and a different entry point and a different work capacity. And that's where it all boils down to, like, for that team, it is such a different business model than, the great Twitch streamer who just broke 1,000 followers.
So, I mean, if you can, Andrew, and you've mentioned some amazing clients, I know you have a lot more that you haven't mentioned. I would love to take these parameters or these generic, not generic, but you know what I mean, these general insights and apply them specifically to any of your clients or projects that you're comfortable talking about, from, a Cloud9, a Ninja, Phoenix Suns. You mentioned Gary V. Someone like the Phoenix Suns might be very, like you mentioned, have a very different interest than Ninja or John Legend, right? So I'm curious if you could pick any 2 or 3.
Ninja's interesting, right? Because we had Jessica Blevins on the show.
Amazing.
And so it was interesting to see how she managed Ninja and how she thought about his brand.
And the relaunch was wonderful, and putting, like, really this, I think a lot of us know what, obviously in this space and on this podcast, and for the people listening, we all know what he looks like, right? But to make, that icon, that image, it's like Steve Harvey when he did a rebrand. It was just an outline of his bald head and a mustache, right? It's like, that's really smart. And then with Ninja, you do blue hair, spiked hair, and you're like, wow, like this, I know exactly who they're speaking about without even, so kudos to that team. I think, and this is going to become apparent, like that the one size does not fit all mentalities become apparent in a sec, but like the Phoenix Suns is the NBA's second largest market is China, right? So for a team to be working this space, there's 30 teams in the NBA, and for one out of the 30 teams to be working that space properly is not an easy task. It takes 80 to 100 to 120 posts a week across one platform alone. It takes a localization, service to a T. You're translating every post. You're subtitling every piece of content. You're making unique content for market. You are driving engagement numbers through the roof because that's what they're looking for, because it's a globally recognized organization, right? And who is, yes, of course, after followers and engagement, but what comes with that are sponsorship programs, deals of the sorts, like their current partners wanting to invest in their expansion into market and things of that nature. It's really a whole like business strategy across the board. For someone like Ninja, and with the rebrand and with getting that out there, he needed a presence in market, right? He's one of the most followed esports athletes in the world, and up until us didn't have his verified channels, active channels, localized channels, things of that sort in market. And that is really, it's a fairly new type of partnership here. I don't think we've been working with their team for longer than 6 months now, but it really is starting from almost scratch. Even though he has these tens of millions of followers in the Western world, it's virtually, non-existent in the Eastern world, even though, of course, people in the gaming community know of the name, know who he is. See that he now has channels is such a wonderful thing.
I mean, that's a great sort of follow-up question, and you touched on it. How quickly do audiences transfer from, call it, west to east, right?
Yeah.
Like a Ninja who maybe has, I don't even know what he's up to now, 10, 15, 20 million, followers, whatever the number is, some huge number. How quickly, after you set up in Asia or in China specifically, does his audience build there like at a rapid pace because it's Ninja? Right. Is it starting from zero for anyone else?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because for some people, it's overnight 100,000 followers within 24 hours. For Ninja, it's no one here's a good example. When we launched Imagine Dragons, TikTok of China, right? You would think that they would have. Yeah. Anyways, when we launched their TikTok of China, within 24 to 48 hours, I think we garnered like 90,000 followers. And this is off of 1 to 2 video posts. And we have great ties with their platform. They gave us a lot of marketing exposure for nothing. It was really wonderful to launch their channels. And they have a huge fan presence over there already. Whereas Ninja, who's an esports athlete, historically, esports content creators and these gamers and people and athletes and these teams, it's not common for any of them to work China. So when someone launches an account and verifies their account, right? So first you have to verify it to make it known that it's actually this person and this team. And then even then this is so unique. We've never seen this before. We've never seen anyone do this, And so it's a lot more slow type of build and type of lift than you would have for like an Imagine Dragons has been touring there for 10 years and releases music constantly that resonates with market and does brand deals that does this. So it's just different. There's just levels. And again, it's not one size fits all, but it's hit or miss. For all we know, we could take someone like Nike, just signed their first ever esports athlete signing. And that is like the pivotal point where it's like, okay, we should launch this. Everyone's talking about it. You get global support. So yeah, it just totally depends, I think.
I see Paul and I both ready to jump on that Nike story because we had discussed it at length on the live show. Yeah. And a lot of questions on our end, I think, on why that was chosen, that region. And I would love your insight there, as well as our regular guests, I'm sure, that have the same. And I also want to point a second part of that question, Andrew, because, sure. Not just for a client of yours, for like a Ninja that we've been talking about, but also someone like Nike. You mentioned verifying these accounts. I want to know if your clients or if the sponsors and the partners that you work with, what questions they have about that authenticity or accuracy, rather, of followers, of views, of impressions, and what's the response you give them in terms of trusting the numbers that you see on these platforms. But first, if you could, I don't know, however you want to tackle that and whatever makes sense to you, but we definitely want to get into that Nike story. But I wanted to know my question as well in the context of that, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a tough question. I don't know the intricacies. I don't know who championed that within the the mega corporation conglomerate that is Nike. But I do know that Uzi, and even before this, I was looking into it, but like Uzi was featured in an esports ad that Nike put out 2 years ago. Right. So for all we know, and unless you guys are super close to Uzi and his team, and I don't know if you guys are, but unless you are, I would be very curious to know from his team, like, has this been a multi-year in the process type of endeavor? Did they see a huge spike in social activity in 2020 when they put him in an ad ages ago? Like, what did the China team see a huge spike? Like, what did that look like? And how did the person at Nike or on Uzi's team raise their hand and go, hey, we should really try to work on something together? And why did they think that? What gust of wind flew by their head where they're like, this feels like a good opportunity? And I honestly, Jimmy, I'd be excited. I think that could be a good future episode for y'all. I think that could be really exciting.
We could probably spend the whole hour just on a deep dive there, right? And
right.
And guessing what the thinking in the boardroom was, and we did some of that last week, some of the tinfoil hat theories that we talk about on the show. But it was a little bit surprising to me, I'll be honest, just because of what I would call Chinese gaming headwinds. Right. If I'm being diplomatic. And I think, and I love, Andrew, your thoughts on the challenges in this market specific to gaming, right? Maybe not so much in the other sort of entertainment verticals that you're involved with, but in gaming specifically, where I think you have a little bit of a trifecta of challenges, and I'll name them and feel free to address some or none or all of them. But the first is really like data and integrity of data. And what I mean by that is, we talk about viewership for tournament XYZ, and sort of the industry is at a point where now they publish numbers excluding China and with China, so that because everyone is sort of not sure if the numbers are true or not. They're all so big that everyone says, is this accurate? How are they measuring it? Right. So there's a little bit of uncertainty around the data. Headwind number one. Headwind number two is like just the closures around COVID, which has hampered live events, which has affected, I think, the gaming industry. And then the third is really the regulatory environment that has limited gaming, especially for minors, right? Where they can't play past a certain hour, or they can only play a certain number of hours per day. I'm curious if any of those three headwinds you see slowing down the interest in sort of deploying for gaming in China, or if it hasn't affected that.
Yeah, Paul, all good points. And I think in any sort of rules and regulations, I think that you are definitely going to see some sort of slowdown. Do I know the statistic of new esports players, athletes, gamers, whatever, creators, whatever you want to call it? Do I know how many of those are converting each day into actual players? No. Do I know if that number outweighs that of the people who take their foot off the gas because of these regulations? It very much could. And if that's the case, then we're always going to see an upward trend. But I don't know, which gets us, to our next point of data is historically, it's been from all major tech in China, very difficult to pull factual and actual numbers. That would be a great name for a data center studio. actual. But it's always been a state of, and I don't want to, point fingers and say piracy, because there's been some companies who've been very transparent since the get-go and others who haven't. I think due to regulatory standards, they're not really, it's not a need for them, a law for them to come out and say, this is actually, and to our fans in the West, what we're doing and how we're doing it and so on and so forth. It's more confidential, which I think won't necessarily be a hindrance to future players and, and people of the sort. Do I think that it worries people who do deals with these companies and it looks to expand into that market and work with those platforms? Absolutely. Because we're used, and us people living in the West, we're used to full transparency out the get-go. It's Facebook or Meta has been taken to court countless times over because of their data issues. And it has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way versus the other end of the spectrum in China, where it's, nope, this is just how it is. So I think west to east, it's a tough pill to swallow, but Easterners are just, I would imagine, just used to the lay of the land there and landscape.
Yeah.
COVID, of course, I would actually imagine, I'm very curious to understand, Twitter saw a spike in users, Twitch saw a spike in all these, everyone's locked up in a home. What are you going to do? Right. But I wonder, especially now, and talking to your point of rules and regulations, for the listeners who don't know, in China, and don't quote me on this because I don't know the exact timing of nights or age limit, but 1 week or 1 day out of every week, excluding holidays, it used to be kids under any age could play video games all day long if they wanted to. But now there's a rule and regulation that says that kids cannot, and I think, and again, don't quote me on it, it's under 18, can't play video games outside of certain hours on Friday evenings or something of the sort, or Saturdays, or I'm not too sure. That I can only imagine has definitely slowed down the usage and playability of these games. Not even playability, even if it's just a program, that they're working on or whatever it is, has definitely dwindled, especially the younger generations that are still living with their parents and, have one family computer or use a certain amount of bandwidth or whatever it is, where the government kind of just cracked down and was like, nope, you can't do this any longer. So that had to have put a bit of a roadblock on things.
It sounds like, we could agree or disagree if the headwinds sort of cause a slowdown or decrease in the size of the audience, or how opaque or transparent the the data is. But I think the conclusion I come to, having heard you sort of talk through that, was regardless of what you think the effect of the regulatory environment or COVID or any of these headwinds has on the audience, it makes it the case even stronger to work with companies like you and yours, like an East Coast Global, to navigate those headwinds. I mean, if anything, the headwinds, creates more reasons to not go alone, basically.
Yeah. And I think, and that's such a big focal point of our company, is that like transparency and kind of hand-holding into market. Both of you guys, you have so much on your plates everywhere else in the world. It's why, yes, there's 1.5 billion people. The chances are we hit every single one of those people, slim. The chances are we break a percentage of them is a lot stronger than 1.5. But even then, that's a solid market. But the fact of the matter is it's been operating in this vacuum for so long that you really do need someone who's a market expert. And luckily, we now, as a team, I think we have like 15, 16, and continuing to hire employees who are so 24/7 hyper-focused in market. And 80% of our team is native Chinese. So you really have to every day be thinking and learning. And, I've been doing the same thing 24/7 for the past 5 years. And it's really opened my eyes up to this world that I had no idea about leading up to it. Not a clue, and saw a massive opportunity. And not, and I was speaking to a couple of people today over a coffee about it. I never once thought of myself as landing and going, wow, look at this opportunity. There's 1.5 billion people there. I saw it quite on the flip end, where I don't see any Westerner working this space. There's no one that's doing this properly, and more looking at it from a Western perspective of how can I help the most people here truly be recognized as the global figures that they are. Yeah. And you need that knowledge to enter this space. After all, Paul, you're living in the Middle East right now, and it's like, I know nothing about the market. Nothing, how it ticks, how it moves, what time people are up, when they go to bed, what's the working hours are, etc. And that's something that you don't just learn overnight. You have to be there for the amount of months that you've been there.
Exactly right. It's the reason I moved here, because you do have to. You can't operate remotely and expect to have success in a market. I just don't think it works that way. So
totally.
I buy the thesis and the premise completely. Andrew, that brings us to everyone's favorite new segment, which is Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. If you're new to this, the way this works, if you're a new listener, Judge Jimmy's going to ask a few rapid-fire questions to get to know you better as a person, a business person, a gamer. Cool. Get behind the scenes a little bit. Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Andrew. Easy first one. What's your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, dude, that's RuneScape. I would say RuneScape, or any Pokemon as well. I have a couple of like Pokemon figurines and like these 3D cubes I got off Etsy, which are they've always just been on my desk. So I'm just, nostalgia hits when I think of Pokemon.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. As someone that spends a lot of time bringing brands and expanding their social presence in China, what's your favorite social media platform in the States, or available in the West?
That's a great question. I would say TikTok. My algorithm is so damn funny. My fiance, when she describes it to people, she's like, Andrew literally just has large size men dancing and eating food. It's one of those things where you could lay in bed like crying at night because you're laughing so hard. So I get a real kick out of that.
All right. Last one for you, Andrew. What is your favorite cuisine or snack or drink while you're gaming?
Oof. While I'm gaming, is, some people hate this or they love it, but just a big bag of like Snyder pretzels. Just the salty, the crunch. It definitely dries you out. But
what do you drink with that?
A nice glass of ice water when I'm a little parched from all that.
Very healthy. Very healthy.
Yeah. But if I'm at a movie, it's a bag of popcorn and another bag of Skittles.
Nice. Yeah. Andrew, appreciate having you here. That's it for Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. Back to you, Paul.
I loved it. Thank you.
Andrew, for people who want to find you, follow you, learn more about what East Goes Global is doing, where can you be found or followed?
Sweet. All of our handles across the board is just at East Goes Global. Myself personally is just at Andrew Spalter. I've no, it used to be in the AIM days, Ange50, but that isn't really around anymore.
Very cool. Look, I love what you guys are doing. I think, especially that self-serve kind of product, for everybody, it makes so much sense, right? Everyone needs to be plugged in there. The opportunity there is massive, obviously, and love what you guys are doing in the space. I highly recommend everyone going to check out East Goes Global. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I let everyone go and wrap this up. Make sure to follow Business of Esports everywhere. We're on every platform, not in China yet, though, although we'll have to have that discussion. But on LinkedIn, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, you name it, on every platform. We put content on all these platforms. We appreciate a follow on all of them. Also, don't forget, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, every Wednesday, we do a live stream. We do it after we tape the podcast. It's live. You get to ask questions. You get to challenge us, get in our faces. It's a bigger cast. We cover all the news from the week. It's a lot of fun. Wednesdays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Again, we stream it on every platform we're on, YouTube, Twitch, etc. You can follow us on all those platforms and participate. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you to our audience. Don't forget, guys, the most important thing, though, the future is fun. We'll see you next week.